Hello everybody, good day. So I want to ask you a question. You have been choosing the right food to eat, eating it on time, exercising extra, really watching your sugar, but despite everything, your blood glucose is still spiking. And to make things worse, when you visit your doctor, aka me, we increase your dosage and even add new ones, right? If this feels extremely familiar, just hang in there because I think today I'm going to introduce something that it's not very new. It has been around since Ayurvedic practices, even in the Western culture, something called food sequencing. But I don't think it's that well established or routinely practiced, definitely not from where I come from. Today, in this video, I'm going to break down what food sequencing is, what it does to the body, what's the evidence behind it, and how you can incorporate this into food that you already consumed. So let's get right into it. So what is the problem that we're facing? It is the 3 p.m. food coma. Now you eat a healthy lunch, but by 3 p.m. you feel tired, unfocused, and quite frankly ready for a nap. That makes all of us. And this energy crash is what we call a food coma. And this slump is indefinitely followed by an intense craving for sugar and caffeine throughout the afternoon. Now the culprit isn't necessarily what you ate, but the sequence in what you ate it in. Now we have path A and path B, right? Path A, if you can look at this roller coaster of glucose spikes, it's very intense up and downs, and on path B you can see a very nicely distributed curve. Science says is that when you eat carbohydrates first or with everything else, they are digested very quickly, and this floods your bloodstream with glucose, which reflects on the spikes. And to digest this carbohydrate, your body will release large amounts of insulin to manage this sudden surge. And this insulin often overshoots, and that is why your blood sugar will sometimes crash below baseline. And this roller coaster of high and low glucose is what causes brain fog, lethargy, and cravings, as opposed to solution B, which we're going to talk about. So the solution, which we saw on path B, is something that we call the food sequencing system. Now what it actually is quite literally sequencing the different macronutrients, veggies or fibers, followed by protein and carbs. And that's what food sequencing is. Now, why does this have a more beneficial effect on anyone's gut? When we introduce the dietary fiber, it creates some sort of a barrier, or like a mesh you want to call it. And this mesh will inhibit the glucose diffusion and slow down your carbs, digestion, and absorption. Now, when this absorption of glucose is much slowed down, it will quite frankly blunt the glucose spikes, which prevents the subsequent energy crash. So, are we postulating out of thin air? Definitely not. So we have a very robust paper, the UAE Healthy Adults trial. Yes, not trialed in diabetic patients, but in healthy adults. So what was their focus? Their participants were healthy, non-diabetic adults, proving that this actually works for general wellness. Your study design is the gold standard for clinical trials, which is a randomized controlled crossover where participants experience the intervention as well as optimize their control. And this was published in a diabetic peer-reviewed journal. So this isn't just theory, it is actually backed by robust evidence, which studied 18 participants from the UAE. That's one limitation, where the study sample is fairly small. What did they derive from this study? Now, just focus on this graph. The red one is a standard mixed meal, and the blue one is vegetables and proteins first, where they spaced out their meals in the sequence for about 10 to 15 minutes, as opposed to combining everything like I do and from where I come from, which is called the standard mixed meal. Now, there was a 40% reduction in glucose spike. When you have this significant amount of glucose spike, obviously your body producing the insulin will also be reduced by 31.7%, and this reduces the stress, which reduces the cells from becoming stubborn or resistant, and lesser damage on your whole metabolic system. So And also the participants reported feeling significantly fuller for longer after this sequence meal. Again, just to conclude that the glucose spike was significantly reduced by 40%. So, how can you practice this? If you're at home, very simply put, if you cook, when you cook veggies first, they don't take long to cook, so the veggies are done. Then when you move on to your protein and your carbs, they take longer to cook, at least 10 minutes. So in that space, you can already consume your veggies, which is a bowl of salad, or cooked greens, soups, and then consume your protein and carb. And it frankly works with any sort of meal that you're going to have. And if you're eating out, very commonly you will be offered a bread basket with butter, and instead what you can opt to do is to consume it later with your carbs, or substitute it with a bowl of salad. And of course, if we are going to be consuming a meal where usually it's all already made together, like a bowl of pasta, sandwiches, burgers, well, it's not going to make sense to nitpick and eat your tomatoes first and things like that. But do what you can, but you understand the concept. And that, my friends, is basically what food sequencing is. Our Monday morning protocol, I think we can start small, just for lunch, simply by starting with a fiber source. And there's no need to be perfect, just experiment it with one meal a day. And if you're in a place where you can afford and have access to continuous glucose monitoring, you can very well pick up the change that it does to your body and individualize it. Now, this is not a harmful intervention. It's not a cost ineffective intervention. It is something that we are already doing. And I hope this information was extremely useful to you. It is for me, and it will help me guide my patients better. And if you found this useful, drop a comment, subscribe, like, and I'll see you in the next one.